The North Atlantic Ocean, December 4th, 1872. The sea was calm that morning, unnervingly calm. Pale sunlight cut through thin layers of mist, glinting off waves like small shards of glass. The British brigantine Dei Gratia advanced steadily toward Gibraltar after leaving New York nearly a month before. Her captain, David Morehouse, a seasoned mariner in his late 30s, stood near the bow, his eyes narrowed against the wind. At approximately 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the lookout's voice sliced through the quiet. "Ship ahead!" Through his telescope, Morehouse saw it clearly now. Another brigantine, sails torn and flapping loosely, drifting unevenly across the current. Nothing unusual about encountering ships out here, except for one detail. This one seemed alive, but empty. Its motion was wrong, unnatural, as though no one had touched the helm in days. Morehouse raised the scope again. The ship's name came into focus through the salt haze, Mary Celeste. A chill pressed into his chest. He knew that name, knew the captain, Benjamin Briggs, of Marion, Massachusetts. A respectable man, a friend. They had dined together before setting sail from New York, talking about routes, winds, and the promise of safe arrival. Now, seeing the Mary Celeste adrift in open ocean, something deep inside Morehouse turned cold. He ordered the helmsman to alter course. "Bring us alongside," he said. As the Dei Gratia drew closer, it became clear that the other ship was not sunk, not smashed by waves, not burned. Her hull was sound, her sails damaged but manageable, yet no signal flags hung and no figures moved on deck. The air felt heavy, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. "Call out to her!" Morehouse shouted. His first mate, Oliver DeVoe, cupped his hands. "Ahoy, the Mary Celeste! Do you require aid?" Silence. The only reply came from the creaking of timber and the rhythmic slap of the tide against the hull. They tried again. Nothing. After 10 minutes, Morehouse made a choice. He turned to DeVoe. "Take 2 men. Board her." When DeVoe and his crew rowed across the water, the smell of salt and decay grew stronger. The Mary Celeste rose and fell gently as though asleep. They threw a line, climbed aboard, and found no one. No screams, no footprints, no struggle, just emptiness. The deck was wet but tidy, ropes coiled loosely, a few sails shredded from a recent squall. On the surface it looked like a ship mid-journey, only the crew was gone. Below deck, the story deepened. The crew's belongings remained: boots, pipes, clothing. The captain's logbook, last entry 10 days earlier, food supply intact, water barrels nearly full, even alcohol cargo still sealed, untouched. But the lifeboat was missing. Back on the Dei Gratia, Captain Morehouse waited tensely for word. When DeVoe returned, his face said everything before his words did. "She's deserted, sir. Not a soul on board." The ship floated there, alive but abandoned. Somewhere between America and Europe, a family and 7 crewmen had vanished into the sea without trace. And yet nothing suggested disaster, no damage, no sign of violence. It was as if the people had simply stepped off. That evening, as the sky darkened and the Atlantic deepened into black silence, Morehouse made his decision. They would sail the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar themselves, but even as he spoke, unease hung among the crew like fog. What had happened aboard that ship? Why would an experienced captain abandon a seaworthy vessel? The truth, whatever it was, had vanished as suddenly as the people who lived it. And so began one of the strangest maritime mysteries in history, the real, unsolved story of the Mary Celeste. December 5th, 1872. As dawn crept over the Atlantic, pale light revealed 2 ships sailing side by side, the Dei Gratia, and, behind it, the ghostly Mary Celeste, now under command of First Mate Oliver DeVoe. Every creak of its wood echoed across the water, as if the vessel itself whispered secrets no one could hear. For Captain Morehouse, sleep was impossible that night. He sat in his small cabin, turning the events over and over in his mind. His friend Benjamin Briggs was a man known for discipline and caution. The thought that Briggs would abandon his ship voluntarily seemed absurd, and yet the evidence, or rather the lack of it, left no other explanation. By day, the crew exchanged nervous glances whenever they looked toward the Mary Celeste. The sea was calm now, the wind steady. The ship followed like a shadow, obedient, lifeless. From a distance, it looked almost normal, carrying its invisible crew forward toward Gibraltar. Inside the Mary Celeste, Devoe took detailed notes for the Admiralty inquiry that would certainly follow. Every item was logged. 6 months' worth of food, barrels of fresh water, and more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, all still sealed, except for 9 found empty, possibly due to leaking through faulty oak casks. But no sign of fire, no explosion, no panic. The ship's chronometer and sextant were missing from the captain's cabin, along with the ship's papers. That meant someone had left deliberately, perhaps expecting to return. But where were they now? The Dei Gratia reached Gibraltar on December 13th. Upon sight of the 2 ships, the port officials grew alert. It was not every day a captain arrived towing another vessel from the middle of the Atlantic. British maritime law required an inquiry, and soon the salvage hearing of the Mary Celeste became one of the most curious proceedings in nautical history. The court convened under Frederick Solly Flood, the Attorney General for Gibraltar, a careful but suspicious man. From the very beginning, Solly Flood found the story difficult to accept. Ships simply did not vanish of their own accord, he told his clerk. Someone had to be lying. In the weeks that followed, the hearing delved deep into every corner of the event. Crew members were examined one by one. Their testimony remained consistent. They described finding no traces of blood, no broken railings, no struggle, nothing indicating foul play. Yet Solly Flood pressed harder, convinced that Captain Morehouse and his men might have staged the rescue to claim the insurance reward for salvage. Rumors spread through the harbor taverns, talk of piracy, mutiny, drunkenness, even murder. Some said the crew had opened the barrels of alcohol, become intoxicated, and turned on their captain. Others believed that gas fumes had leaked, convincing Briggs that an explosion was imminent, forcing him to evacuate. Still, another theory claimed the ships had collided and that the Dei Gratia crew eliminated the survivors to conceal evidence. None of these claims fit the facts. Nothing seemed to fit at all. Investigators inspected the hull carefully. There were scratches, but no real damage. The bilge contained only a few feet of water, an amount small enough for an experienced captain to manage easily. Tow lines were found cut cleanly, not torn. The condition of the galley was orderly, mid-meal preparation abandoned, as though someone had stepped away for a minute and never returned. Briggs's sword, discovered in his cabin, bore a faint stain, tested later and proven to be rust, not blood. Weeks passed. The court, unable to find criminals where none existed, eventually ruled in favor of the Dei Gratia sailors, granting them a smaller salvage reward than expected. Solly Flood, still convinced that something darker lay beneath the surface, withheld full payment for months. Back in America, newspapers exploded with speculation. "Ship of ghosts found floating," read one headline. "Family and crew disappear into thin air," read another. The name Mary Celeste became a sensation across the Atlantic world. It was no longer just a vessel, it was a mystery no one could explain. Captain Morehouse returned to sea months later, his reputation scarred by suspicion. Benjamin Briggs's family never received closure. His wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and the 7 crewmen who vanished with them were never found. Not a single lifeboat was recovered, nor any trace of wreckage. Historians and sailors debated endlessly. One theory proposed a water spout, a rare column of rotating water that could have terrified the crew into abandoning ship temporarily. Another pointed to faulty alcohol barrels releasing fumes, prompting an emergency evacuation. But both ideas faced the same problem. Why did they never return? Years passed. New captains took command of the Mary Celeste after her recovery, but none sailed her for long. Crewmen reported unease aboard, a constant feeling of being watched, though nothing ever occurred that science could not explain. Eventually, the ship's reputation for misfortune became too strong. She was sold repeatedly, changing owners like a relic refusing peace. By 1885, her luck finally ran out. Her then captain, intent on insurance fraud, intentionally ran her aground near Haiti. The plan failed. The ship broke apart. The Mary Celeste, once a proud brigantine of Massachusetts, ended her days splintered on a foreign reef. Still, the questions remained. Why would a competent captain, with a loyal crew and his family aboard, abandon his vessel in open water? Why would trained sailors lower a lifeboat and disappear forever under calm skies? The ocean, as it always does, kept its silence. In the months following the inquest, fragments of the story appeared across Europe and America. Letters from friends of Captain Briggs described him as sober, responsible, and deeply religious, a man unlikely to panic. The crew, carefully chosen, had no criminal records or history of violence, and so the mystery grew, fed by the absence of answers. By early 1873, the Mary Celeste had become legend. For sailors crossing the Atlantic, her name carried weight, a cautionary whisper against the unpredictable sea. Every mariner who read the reports felt the same uneasy truth. Everything they knew about seamanship, discipline, and command could not explain how a ship survived, but its people vanished. The Atlantic swallowed them and left their ship behind as witness. By the late 1870s, the Mary Celeste had become an obsession for journalists, sailors, and amateur investigators alike. Her empty voyage across the Atlantic captured imaginations not because of what was found, but because of everything that was not. Every time someone tried to close the case, another theory appeared, each one more intricate than the last. One of the first detailed investigations came from a Boston Maritime journal in 1874. A reporter interviewed both American and British sailors who had known Captain Benjamin Briggs personally. They described a thoughtful man who avoided risk, trusted his instincts, and was fiercely devoted to his family. The mere suggestion that he would risk his wife's and daughter's safety on an impulse rang false to anyone who knew him. "He must have believed there was no choice," one former colleague said. "That's the only way he would have left that ship." The supposed cause varied with each retelling. Some argued that toxic fumes from leaking alcohol barrels filled the lower deck, a silent danger that could have made the crew fear an explosion. Perhaps, they said, Benjamin Briggs ordered everyone into the lifeboat until the air cleared, tethering the rope to the Mary Celeste. But if the rope slipped or snapped, the sea would have carried them quietly away forever. Others sought answers in the natural world. Could a sudden squall or seaquake have struck without warning, convincing them the ship was about to sink? The Atlantic is vast, dynamic, and cruel. It swallows evidence just as easily as it hides truth. But how could such an event leave a ship so untouched, her sails only slightly torn, her hull nearly pristine? Decades passed. The original witnesses aged, died, and disappeared into history, leaving behind testimony written in old ink and fading paper. Yet the story refused to die with them. Each new generation rediscovered it, writing fresh articles, lectures, and serialized pieces for newspapers hungry for maritime mysteries. The phrase ghost ship became permanently tied to the Mary Celeste. In the early 20th century, the British writer Arthur Conan Doyle added fuel to the legend with a fictionalized story loosely inspired by the case. He renamed the ship Mary Celeste, and filled it with melodrama and supernatural suggestion. The story spread quickly, blurring the line between imagination and truth. Soon, many readers believed Doyle's version was the real account. The true historical details were swallowed by the legend's shadow. But historians who revisited the primary documents found no trace of the fantastical. The facts remained as stubborn and silent as the sea itself. A seaworthy ship, a skilled captain, no crew, no clear reason. In every retelling, one detail continued to disturb researchers more than any other. The ship's last log entry, dated 10 days before discovery, described calm seas near the Azores. No hint of danger, no panic. The handwriting, firm and steady, stopped mid-journey as if nothing unusual had occurred. For the rest of the voyage, silence. When modern oceanographers reviewed the case more than a century later, they revisited locations suggested by the log. Computer models placed the Mary Celeste about 50 miles off course from her intended route. That distance, small on a map, might have meant fog, altered winds, or minor navigational error. But it also placed her in waters known for unpredictable pressure pockets, phenomena that can lift or drop sea level abruptly. If such an event occurred, it might have frightened the crew into temporary evacuation. Yet there was no physical proof, only possibility. The power of the Mary Celeste mystery lies not just in the unanswered questions, but in how perfectly preserved those questions remain. Unlike tragedies marked by violence or destruction, this one left everything intact except the people. Clothes laid neatly in cabins, children's toys undisturbed, a half-written letter still waiting on the captain's desk. It's as if the human story ended mid-breath, leaving the vessel to carry on alone. Even now, the ship's log and items recovered from her deck rest in maritime museums, studied by generations of historians. Every observer comes away with the same uneasy conclusion: nothing truly explains what happened. And perhaps that is why the Mary Celeste endures, because it resists all tidy endings. Today, nearly 150 years later, the Mary Celeste remains a kind of monument to the unknowable. Maritime historians, scientists, and storytellers still return to her tale because it defies every pattern, every expectation of how humans behave in crisis. She stands as proof that sometimes the simplest events, an empty ship, a vanished crew, exert the greatest pull on human imagination. Modern research teams have used deep water scans, meteorological modeling, and chemical tests on preserved samples from her cargo. The alcohol theory remains the most accepted among experts. If vapors built inside the hold, Captain Briggs might have ordered evacuation as precaution, planning to return when safe. A single spark could have convinced him the ship was doomed. But without wind, the lifeboat could not drift back. The Atlantic current took it, slowly, silently, far from sight. That explanation, while logical, does not satisfy everyone. There is no debris field, no identified remains, no evidence of a lifeboat ever found adrift. Some scholars insist the most haunting aspect of the Mary Celeste case is how completely the sea erased the people from its record. It is one thing to perish in the ocean. It is another to vanish so completely that only wood and rope remain. Sailors who came after carried the story as warning. No matter how much control a captain believes he holds, the sea always decides the final word. The Mary Celeste became a symbol of what every sailor fears most, not waves or storms, but silence, a quiet beyond explanation. When speaking of the case, maritime historians often point out that Captain Briggs was a man of faith and order. His final choices likely came not from panic, but duty, the duty to protect his family and crew from a danger he could neither see nor measure. In that sense, the tragedy of the Mary Celeste is deeply human, a decision made with good intention, met by merciless chance. In cultural memory, the ship continues to sail. Documentaries, books, and films revisit the mystery again and again, each time offering a slightly different lens. Artists paint her drifting beneath a grey sky. Writers describe her as the ghost of a vanished age of sail. But every depiction circles back to the same moment on that December afternoon in 1872, when Captain David Morehouse lowered his spyglass and read the name painted on her stern: Mary Celeste. What he saw that day was not a ghost story. It was a human story, one defined not by terror, but by absence. Perhaps that is what continues to move us after so many decades. The quiet dignity of an unanswered question. The ocean gave her back but kept her people. And in doing so, it left behind something more enduring than answers: mystery itself. So when the waves shift under distant stars and the night turns perfectly still, sailors sometimes say the same thing their ancestors once whispered. Somewhere on that dark horizon, the Mary Celeste still drifts, carrying her silence across time. Because some stories never end, they simply keep floating.